Before executions, inmates have one last opportunity to address the public with their last words. They can say whatever they want. While some ask for forgiveness, others have some creepy and crazy things to say that shake the audience to the core. Some criminals over the years have had pretty interesting things to say just before their last breath. From dancing with the Grim Reaper to ending all pleasure with the pleasure of beheading, here are the top 10 spine-chilling last words from prison inmates. Let's begin. Number 10. Robert Alton Harrison. This story is from 1992, of a guy who was involved in the murder of 2 teens. Harris was sentenced to die 13 years ago for killing 16-year-olds John Majewski and Michael Baker in 1978. A flurry of legal appeals kept delaying what became the state's first execution in 25 years. In an extraordinary move, Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor ruled that no further delays of Harris's execution would be allowed unless ordered by the Supreme Court. And thus, the date for Harrison's execution was decided in April 1992. However, even on the day of the execution, there were delays. Finally, after an exhausting night of uncertainty, Harris was put to death at dawn on April 21st in California's gas chamber. The guard recorded Harris's final statement, and it was not only scary, but also very mysterious. He said, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everybody dances with the Grim Reaper." Does anyone know what this means? Number 9. George Engel. When you know it's going to be your last day on Earth, you can pretty much feel and say anything. That was the case with George Engel. Engel was one of the 4 men executed after being convicted of being involved in the bombing that started the Haymarket affair. Engel, a German immigrant, had traveled to the United States because of poor economic conditions in his country. A riot started in Chicago, Illinois, as a peaceful protest with demonstrators demanding 8-hour workdays, but quickly became violent when police attempted to disperse the crowd, leading to a protester throwing a stick of dynamite at police officers. The blast and subsequent gunfire took the lives of 7 officers and 4 civilians. Engel was actually at home playing cards, but he was charged with 3 others for the blast. Before he was hanged, Engel screamed, "Hurrah for anarchy! This is the happiest moment of my life." Chilling, isn't it? Ugh. Number 8. Roger Keith Coleman. This guy could be the reason before the term, "It's not a lie if you believe it." Coleman, a coal miner from Grundy, Virginia, had a history of sexual intimidation and violence. From the moment of his arrest until he took his final breath in the electric chair, Roger Keith Coleman insisted he didn't sexually assault and murder his wife's sister, 19-year-old Wanda McCoy, on the night of March 10, 1981. Despite his sordid past and compelling physical and forensic evidence in the case, he convinced an army of supporters, from spiritual leaders and lawyers to strangers around the world, that he did not commit the crime. However, the law looked at the evidence, and Coleman was put on the death penalty. Even on the day of his execution on May 20th, 1992, Coleman said, "An innocent man is going to be murdered tonight. When my innocence is proven, I hope America will realize the injustice of the death penalty as all other civilized countries have." He still hasn't been proven innocent. Number 7. Timothy McVeigh. Up next, we have this guy who looks like a nerd but was responsible for the death of hundreds of people. Timothy McVeigh is best known as the Oklahoma City bomber and was convicted of setting the bomb, killing 149 adults and 19 children and injuring 680 others at the federal building in Oklahoma City on April 19, 1995. If you don't know, this bombing was the deadline bombing attack that happened in the United States. Unlike Roger Coleman, McVeigh knew what he had done and had no final words before being executed by lethal injection on June 11, 2001. As his last words, he left a letter quoting the last lines of the poem called Invictus by Sir William Ernest Henley. It read, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." Number 6. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer. Next up, we have the infamous Milwaukee cannibal, Jeffrey Dahmer, who was so tired and bored of living that he actually said, "I don't care if I live or die. Go ahead and kill me." Before his execution, Dahmer was an American serial killer and sex offender who committed rape, murder, and dismemberment of 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. Many of his later murders involved necrophilia, cannibalism, and the permanent preservation of body parts, typically all or part of the skeleton. Dahmer had many disorders, but he was found to be legally sane and, unlike other convicts on this list, was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was actually beaten to death by another inmate on November 28, 1994, and that's when he said those last words. Number 5. Tom Blackjack Ketchum. In the United States, convicts on the death penalty are executed by the use of the electric chair or by lethal injection. However, there was a time when hanging was part of the American culture. Tom Ketchum, a criminal mastermind, was hanged in America for attempting to rob a train. Ketchum's last words were insanely creepy. He uttered, "I'll be in hell before you start breakfast, boys. Let her rip," right before his execution. The execution was a complete failure. You see, Tom was a heavy man. When the body was dropped, the noose cut his head clean off, and the body dropped to the floor. We apologize for putting that imagination in your head. Number 4. John Wayne Gacy. According to a local newspaper, Mr. Wayne couldn't care less about his execution and told the prison guard to kiss his butt. No, we are not talking about Bruce Wayne here. John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer and rapist. Convicted of 33 murders, he was sentenced to death on March 13, 1980, for 12 of those killings. He spent 14 years rotting in prison before he was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. The best part about his death wasn't what he said as his last words, but what he ate as his last meal. John Wayne Gacy ordered 12 fried shrimp, a 12-piece bucket of original recipe KFC chicken, French fries, and a pound of strawberries. It must have been some last meal. Number 3. Aileen Wuornos. I just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6, like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back. These were the last words of an American serial killer who murdered 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990 by shooting them at point-blank range. Aileen was actually a sex worker and had claimed that all those 7 men had either sexually assaulted her or attempted to do it. Aileen said she committed those crimes in self-defense. Wuornos was executed on October 9, 2002, and her last meal was just a cup of coffee. The movie Monster, that came out in 2003, starred Charlize Theron as Wuornos. It portrayed Wuornos' story from childhood until her first murder conviction, and Theron won an Academy Award for the Best Actress for playing Wuornos. Number 2. Carl Panzram. This guy was so eager to die and burn in hell that he actually spat in the executioner's face and told him to hurry up. His exact words were, "Yes, hurry up, you hoser bastard. I could kill a dozen men while you're screwing around." Carl is a very famous serial killer who claimed to have committed 21 murders, most of which could not be corroborated. In his autobiography, he also admitted to 1,000 sodomies of boys and men. After a series of close calls with death and prison stints, he was finally hanged in 1930. When the guard was putting a black hood on his face, Carl didn't let him and made sure the world remembered his face. His grave, at Leavenworth Penitentiary Cemetery, is marked only with his prison number, 31614. Number 1. Peter Kürten. At the top, we have the most spine-chilling words from an inmate. Known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf, Peter Kürten was a German serial killer who committed a series of murders and sexual assaults in 1929 in the city of Dusseldorf. Kürten was called a vampire because he made an extra effort to drink blood from his victims' wounds, and the majority of his crimes were in Dusseldorf, hence the name Vampire of Dusseldorf. In 1913, he also confessed to the murders of 2 girls, described as the king of sexual perverts. Peter Kürten was found guilty of 9 murders and 7 attempted murders. He was sentenced to death by beheading in April 1931 and executed in July 1931. When he was about to be executed, Kürten said to the guard, "Tell me, after my head has been chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be a pleasure to end all pleasures." Crazy, isn't it? And that's it for today. Which inmate's last words did you find the scariest? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.